we're about to zoom in on this Bitcoin chart and we're going to see a lot of emotion and a lot of volatility. But one thing is true, and I want to just start the video here. This trend remains the same, and that is higher highs and higher lows. If you look at the chart now on this zoomed out weekly Bitcoin going back to 2013 on the screen, there actually doesn't seem to be anything out of the ordinary happening. But when we start zooming in and we start looking at big 6-hour red candles, things get a little bit more fearful for many people in the market. And I want to break down targets right now to the upside, as well as targets to the downside, support to downside, and really a new trend that is in play right now that could really dictate what we've been talking about, the pivot point from bear market to bull market. And we're going to just look at this extremely critical channel that Bitcoin is in right now. We start here. This is to lay context to the headlines that are kind of playing into the charts. Markets breathe a sigh of relief following mixed U.S. jobs data. U.S. economy creates 300,000 new jobs in February, above the forecast of 225, but household numbers below forecast with unemployment rate rises to 3.6% above 3.4%. So kind of mixed. There's kind of mixed news going on, and it's a really weird environment right now because on the hourly, you see S&P 500 just kind of falling right now, trying to make a little bit of a comeback. But at the same time, US dollar currency index doing exactly the same thing, which is really weird. We don't see this. Usually we see US dollar currency index falling and stock market, Bitcoin rising. Right now, everything's kind of doing the same thing. I think that's because there's so much indecisiveness right now in the world. Now, let's start digging into the charts. And on the way in, everybody, please hit that like, hit that subscribe, and let's do this. So this is Bitcoin on the daily. Before we talk about targets to the upside and downside and what to anticipate, I just want to point out something. We kind of alluded to this on the weekly as I started the video. We're in this trend, and it's higher highs and higher lows on the macro. Right now, again, to point out, if you look at the RSI, we're falling into oversold. This is so important to me because it's at a time, and the day is not here yet, but it's 4 days away. We are 4 days away from this CPI inflation data coming out. If it is better than anticipated and expected by markets, I think something special could happen next week. I think it could be a green week. And that's important when we start looking at the technicals. We start looking at the fact that, well, on the momentum oscillator, Bitcoin is oversold. Truflation acting so far for months and months as a great leading indicator. Last month, CPI data was not too hot. It wasn't too good what came out. But this could be the month, as you see Truflation now falling well below 5%, this could be the month where CPI data really comes in looking kind of bullish, like what the Fed is doing is really starting to work. And if that happens, we could see Bitcoin pop right out of this oversold environment that it's in. And historically, on this daily chart, that's what Bitcoin does anyway, right? So we could be at this perfect storm of at least short-term bounce, mid-term bounce for Bitcoin and crypto markets, and it could be off of what happens next week with CPI data on March 14th. But until then, we're kind of in this unknown territory. Markets may be fearful of the CPI data, and maybe there's going to be more volatility to the downside, and that's kind of what we should anticipate. And we're going to look at what support looks like for that scenario. So here we are in the daily chart. Before we look at upside scenario, let's look at downside. And then we're going to look at this new channel that's in play right now. So here we are on the daily chart. Look just how wonderful of a setup this is. We hit our $19,000 to $20,000 target almost perfectly. I mean, we have this wick on the daily around $19,500 to $600. It's right in between the $19,000 to $20,000 target, and it's just the whole entire setup is complete. Meaning the rising, broadening wedge that we were tracking is complete, and Bitcoin has hit its target. So we're going to probably race this formation soon. But now Bitcoin is in this new form of structure. It's in this new trend, and we're also hovering above kind of a support area that we need to keep track of. So the new trend looks like this, at least as far as I'm concerned. So we have this swing low to a swing high, right? So now we're starting to put in this structure, this formation. So we take the swing low, and we kind of have this lower trend line looking to form, right? And it's very confluent with current support areas that we're watching on Bitcoin. Now, from that swing low, well, we have the previous swing high that fell from, and we can just kind of take it from right here. We have a new swing high in play, and we have this very clear channel that Bitcoin is setting up within. So, lower trend line all down here, that previous low in the bear market, this swing high, and now we're kind of trending down to the lower trend line. Just note, in terms of what this setup looks like, this could go in either direction. We have a breakout target to, unfortunately, around $12,000 if all fails, right? And if something terrible happens, which there's so much fear in the markets, you can easily log on to Twitter or YouTube and find all of these bearish scenarios. That it's a technical target in play that we should evaluate. But we should also evaluate the fact that if Bitcoin wants to consolidate out of this bear market into a higher high, higher low pattern, this is the pattern for Bitcoin. And you can see the wide range. You can see the wide volatility from where Bitcoin is right now to the upside. It's a 35% swing. From where Bitcoin is right now to the downside, we're looking at another 10% move to test key support. What does support look like? That is the confluent area of support at the lower trend line. This is what we're watching for. It's a higher low Fibonacci that we've most recently discussed, the bear market low so far, to that swing high, and it's the green rectangle. It's a Fibonacci rectangle retracement of 618 to around 19,300, the 786 right around 17,600. It's a key support area, I think, especially as we prepare for this weekend, because CPI data is not here yet. And like we said, right now, even today, as markets trade and they're going to close, obviously stock market will close this weekend, there's just this wonder. There's this question about, well, what is this data going to look like? And if markets are fearful and they're anticipating in a fearful way, there could be downside. So the question is, what happens for Bitcoin if it actually keeps falling into the support area, this lower trend line area? We need and want to see support for Bitcoin. I feel that if we're looking at the RSI and just strictly evaluating data alone and kind of trying to put aside for a second the emotion and the fear, uncertainty, and doubt, the bounce as it approaches that support area is just 100% in play, right? And it would make most sense for Bitcoin. Maybe we see a capitulation for Bitcoin and it's entering just historically crazy oversold environments. But if history repeats itself, Bitcoin's getting very due for a bounce, or at the very least, sideways consolidation out of this momentum oscillator, this oversold area on the momentum oscillator. What that would look like is a bounce right now at its current target out of this pattern that we track. So the bounce happening now and kind of coming to the upside, or we're coming into the support and then we're bouncing to the upside, right? And then maybe on the zoomed in charts, like the 6 hour, if we go over to a 6 hour, maybe we actually start seeing some type of bullish divergence start forming, right? Maybe we just start seeing some higher highs and higher lows at the very least on this 6 hour RSI. And we see right now it's extremely oversold. And even on this chart, looks like it's for a bounce, ready for a bounce. This is the November swing low. It's almost at the same levels. So are we going to get a similar move that we saw when it was at these same levels? So this is what the bearish divergence kind of looks like. You see the higher lows on the momentum oscillator, and then Bitcoin kind of just trading sideways and very volatile on the 6 hour chart while that's happening. Is that going to be the setup for this low being put in, this short-term low? So let's talk about on the daily what upside looks like. Don't know if it's going to happen today, this weekend, if CPI data comes out looking really good next week. But upside really for me is not so much targets, but what happens at certain areas. Big area for me, for I think many people, is probably this trend line that extends all the way to the bull market high back here. It's been just lower highs for Bitcoin. Most recently, you might know Bitcoin kind of came above it, tested it, retested it, and this is a trend line that was most recently broken. So that's a key trend line on the macro chart. What happens for Bitcoin? It's not far away from that trend line. If we zoom in and look at that, we're looking at right around a 2.5–3% move for Bitcoin to test that area. And as Bitcoin trades, more daily candles, we get even closer to that area if Bitcoin's sideways right now. What happens at that trend line? That's a very big deal that I would be monitoring and watching. Now, if there's a bullish rally, I think what's always notable is to keep in mind recent trend lines that are broken. So this entire consolidation pattern, I'm going to delete it, but I am still curious of this trend line. If Bitcoin breaks back above, what happens at the trend line? Kind of that pullback scenario is still in play around $22,000, $23,000. But let's delete that now. And the true trend line, the true target for a short midterm bullish move for Bitcoin would be a reversal out of oversold up and away to this upper trend line. It's around $27,000 to $28,000. That's probably really difficult for people to imagine, given the current bearishness that is in markets right now. On the way up to that area, we have the swing high to swing low. Currently, I'd be looking at the lower high area of resistance. It is around 24,000 at the 786 to around $23,000. So if there is an oversold bounce up to this area, what happens? That's a very big deal. I would be watching for resistance to the upside. So I would say that's the main target area to the upside, outside of, at the very least, a very short-term 2.5% move to this long-term trend line. What happens there? So this is what I will be watching this weekend. I'm curious to how you all are doing out there in these markets. It is brutal. It is tough when all of this is happening, especially towards the end of a bear market. Macroeconomic data not looking so promising, right? At least in the short term, people just waiting, and it's difficult to track. But if we, again, where we started the video, we start zooming out, I think the story becomes more clear, and even the short-term data becomes easier to evaluate and to digest and to look at. So that's what I do, everybody. This is just how I see the charts. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Hit that subscribe, hit that like. I'll see you in the next video. God bless.